Right now, in this very moment, miracles are occurring all around you. The question is not whether miracles exist, they do. The question is whether you have tuned your consciousness to receive them. Think of your consciousness as a radio. A radio sitting silent in a room is capable of receiving countless stations, countless frequencies broadcasting simultaneously through the air. But until you turn the dial to a specific frequency, you hear nothing. The music is there, the voices are there, the programs are broadcasting, but your radio remains silent because it is not tuned in. Your consciousness operates on the same principle. Right now, the frequency of miracles is broadcasting constantly. Every solution to every problem you face, every desire of your heart, every dream you have ever entertained, all of these exist as frequencies in the infinite ocean of consciousness. But you must tune in. How do you tune into the frequency of miracles? You do it through assumption. You do it by assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You do it by daring to believe that what you desire is not only possible but inevitable. When you assume that you already possess what you seek, when you feel it so vividly in your imagination that it becomes more real to you than your present circumstances, you have tuned into the frequency of miracles, and miracles must follow. Let me share with you a fundamental truth that will shake the very foundation of how you have been living your life. Your imagination is not some playful faculty for daydreaming. Your imagination is the creative power of the universe itself operating through you. When the Bible speaks of God creating the world, it is speaking of imagination. God imagined the world into existence. And you, being made in God's image, create your world through your imagination. Every single thing you see around you first existed in someone's imagination. The chair you sit in, the building you occupy, the clothes you wear, all of it was first imagined, then assumed to be real, then manifested in what you call the physical world. But here's where most people go wrong. They imagine what they want, but then they immediately begin to deny it with their assumptions. They imagine prosperity, then assume they are poor. They imagine health, then assume they are sick. They imagine love, then assume they are unworthy. This is like tuning into a beautiful piece of music for a moment, then immediately switching to static. You must learn to hold the frequency. You must learn to persist in your assumption regardless of what your senses tell you. Your senses are not your guide to truth. Your senses report the world as it has been, not as it is becoming. When you plant a seed in the ground, your senses tell you there is nothing there but dirt. But the gardener who understands the law of growth continues to water and tend that soil, knowing that what is invisible to the senses is more real than what is visible. The seed contains within itself the full-grown tree, complete with branches, leaves, and fruit. Your assumption is the seed. And when you plant it in the fertile soil of your consciousness through feeling and imagination, it must grow into your physical experience. This is the frequency of miracles. The unwavering assumption that what you desire in imagination is more real than what you experience with your senses. When you maintain this assumption with the persistence of the gardener watering his unseen seed, the entire universe conspires to bring about its manifestation. People will appear in your life as if by magic to help you. Circumstances will arrange themselves in ways that seem impossible. Doors will open where there appear to be only walls. This is not supernatural. This is the natural operation of consciousness when it is properly directed. But you must understand that assumption without feeling is powerless. It is not enough to think about what you want. You must feel what it would be like to have it. You must enter into the joy, the relief, the satisfaction, the peace that would be yours if your desire were already fulfilled. This feeling is your tuning fork. This feeling is what adjusts your consciousness to the frequency of miracles. Let me tell you about a woman who came to see me. She had been married for 15 years to a man who drank heavily and treated her with contempt. She had tried everything, pleading, threatening, leaving temporarily involving family members. Nothing worked. She came to me broken and desperate, convinced that her situation was hopeless. I told her what I am telling you now. There is no hopeless situation, only people who think hopelessly about situations. I instructed her to stop seeing her husband as he was and to begin seeing him as she wanted him to be. Every night before sleep, she was to imagine him coming home sober, speaking to her with kindness and respect, taking her in his arms with genuine love and affection. She was to feel the reality of this scene until it produced in her the actual emotions she would experience if it were true. She was to persist in this assumption, regardless of his daily behavior. For 3 months, nothing seemed to change. In fact, his drinking appeared to get worse. But she persisted in her nightly ritual of assumption, feeling with increasing vividness what it would be like to be truly loved and cherished by a sober, transformed husband. Then, quite suddenly, everything changed. He began to refuse drinks offered by his friends. He started coming home earlier. He began speaking to her gently and buying her small gifts. Within 6 months, he had become the loving husband she had been imagining. The miracle was not in changing him, the miracle was in changing her assumption about him. When she tuned into the frequency of a loving marriage, that frequency manifested itself in her experience. This is the power I am revealing to you. You are not trying to manipulate or control other people. You are not trying to force circumstances to bend to your will. You are simply tuning into the frequency of what you desire and allowing that frequency to manifest in your world. The people and circumstances in your life are merely reflecting back to you the frequency you are broadcasting through your... Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking of all the reasons why this cannot work for you. You are thinking of your past failures, your current limitations, your lack of education or money or connections. You are thinking that miracles happen to other people, but not to you. Let me address this directly and firmly. These thoughts are the very static that prevents you from tuning into the frequency of miracles. Every excuse you make, every limitation you accept, every reason you give for why you cannot have what you desire is simply your consciousness tuned to the frequency of lack and limitation. You have become so accustomed to this frequency that you think it is reality. But limitation is not reality. Limitation is simply one of many possible frequencies available to your consciousness. The frequency of abundance, of health, of love, of success, of joy, these are equally available to you at every moment. The Bible tells us that with God, all things are possible. But who is this God? This God is your own wonderful human imagination. When you imagine lovingly, when you assume thankfully, when you feel gratefully, you are operating as God in your world. There is no power outside of you that can grant or deny your desires. There is no authority higher than your own consciousness. You are the author of your experience, the director of your life's drama, the artist painting your world with the brush of assumption. But remember, you cannot serve two masters. You cannot assume health while feeling sick. You cannot assume wealth while feeling poor. You cannot assume love while feeling rejected. You must choose which frequency you will tune into and remain faithful to that choice regardless of appearances. This is what I mean by living by faith rather than by sight. Faith is simply fidelity to your assumption in the face of contradictory evidence from your senses. When Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, they complained constantly because their senses told them they were in a barren wilderness with no food and no water. But Moses knew that they were being led to a promised land flowing with milk and honey. Moses represents your imagination holding firm to the promise despite the evidence of the senses. The Israelites represent your doubts and fears that arise when your physical circumstances have not yet conformed to your assumption. You must be Moses in your own life, leading your doubting thoughts out of the Egypt of lack and limitation into the promised land of your fulfilled desires. This process requires what I call a radical revision of your entire concept of how life works. You have been taught that you must work hard, struggle, compete, and fight for what you want. You have been taught that you are at the mercy of economic conditions, other people's decisions, genetic inheritance, and countless other external factors. This teaching has kept you imprisoned in a world of effects, forever trying to change conditions, instead of changing the consciousness that creates conditions. But when you tune into the frequency of miracles, you discover that you are not in the world is in you. Your consciousness is not contained within your physical body is contained within your consciousness. You are not a victim of circumstances. Circumstances are the shadows cast by your assumptions. When you change your assumptions, the shadows must change accordingly. This is why Jesus said, that you must become as a little child to enter the kingdom of heaven. A child does not question whether something is possible. A child simply accepts what is told to them with complete faith. When you were a child, you could imagine yourself as a brave knight, a beautiful princess, or a mighty superhero. And for that moment, you were completely absorbed in that reality. You felt the feelings appropriate to that role. You experienced the joy and excitement of being that character. This is the consciousness you must recapture, not the naivety of childhood, but the ability to completely assume a new identity and feel it as real. The frequency of miracles is accessed through this childlike ability to assume and feel simultaneously. When you desire something, you must assume you already have it and feel the naturalness of having it. You must wear this assumption like a comfortable garment, not like a costume you are trying on. It must feel normal, natural, and inevitable to you that you possess what you desire. Let me give you a practical technique for tuning into this frequency. Tonight, when you go to before you fall asleep, imagine a scene that would naturally occur if your desire were already fulfilled. If you desire prosperity, imagine paying your bills with ease and joy. If you desire love, imagine someone telling you how much they cherish you. If you desire health, imagine someone congratulating you on how wonderful you look and feel. Make this scene short and simple, but make it vivid and natural. See it clearly, hear the words being spoken. Feel the emotions that would naturally arise from such a scene. Now, here is the crucial part. You must not imagine this scene as something you hope will happen in the future. You must imagine it as something happening right now. Feel the reality of it. Let it produce in you the actual feelings you would have if it were occurring at this very moment. Repeat this scene over and over until you fall asleep, maintaining the feeling of its reality throughout. As you do this night after night, you will notice something remarkable beginning to happen. Your daytime thoughts will begin to align with your nightly assumptions. People will begin to treat you differently, though you cannot explain why. Opportunities will begin to appear that seem to come from nowhere. Circumstances will begin to shift in your favor in ways that appear coincidental, but are actually the natural result of your changed consciousness. This is not magic, this is the science of consciousness. Just as tuning a radio to a specific frequency will always bring in the same station, tuning your consciousness to the frequency of miracles will always bring about miraculous results. The law is precise and reliable. It responds to your dominant assumption, not your temporary wishes or fleeting hopes. But you must persist. You must persist beyond the point where your senses tell you nothing is happening. You must persist beyond the point where other people tell you to be realistic. You must persist beyond the point where your own doubts arise to discourage you. The gardener does not dig up his seed after a week to see if it is growing. He knows that growth takes time and that his job is simply to maintain the proper conditions for growth. Your job is to maintain the proper conditions in consciousness for your miracle to manifest. These conditions are assumption and feeling. Assume you have what you desire and feel the naturalness of having it. Do this consistently, persistently, and with unwavering faith in the reliability of the law, and your miracle must appear in your world. Some of you may be wondering about timing. When will your miracle manifest? The answer is that it will manifest in the shortest possible time consistent with natural law. Sometimes this happens overnight. Sometimes it takes weeks or months. The timing depends not on external factors, but on the depth and consistency of your assumption. The more natural it feels to you to have what you desire, the more quickly it will appear in your experience. Do not make the mistake of looking for signs or trying to figure out how your miracle will come about. Your job is not to be the architect of the means. Your job is to be faithful to the end. The end is your desire fulfilled. The means by which it comes about is the responsibility of the infinite intelligence that operates through natural law. Trust that intelligence. It knows paths to your desire that your conscious mind cannot imagine. There was a man who desired to own a particular piece of property that was not for sale. The owner had repeatedly refused all offers and had stated publicly that he would never sell. Using the technique I have shared with you, This man began to imagine nightly that he was walking through the property as its owner, feeling the satisfaction and joy of possession. He persisted in this assumption for several months despite no apparent change in circumstances. Then, quite unexpectedly, the owner's financial situation changed due to circumstances completely unrelated to the property. He found himself in need of immediate cash and decided to sell the very property he had sworn never to part with. The man who had been assuming ownership was the first person he called, and the sale was completed at a price far below what the property was worth. The miracle was not in changing the owner's mind. The miracle was in creating the circumstances that would naturally lead to the desired outcome. This is how miracles work. They do not violate natural law, they fulfill it at a higher level. When you tune into the frequency of miracles through assumption and feeling, you set in motion a chain of natural events that must culminate in the fulfillment of your desire. From your limited perspective, these events may seem miraculous, but from the perspective of universal law, they are simply cause and effect, operating at the level of consciousness. Now, let me address those of you who have tried these principles before without success. You may be thinking that you have imagined and assumed and felt, but nothing happened. Let me ask you this: did you really assume? Or did you merely hope? Did you really feel the reality of your desire fulfilled? Or did you simply think about it? Did you persist in your assumption regardless of circumstances? Or did you allow contradictory evidence to shake your faith? True assumption is not hoping something will happen, it is knowing it. It has already happened in consciousness and must therefore appear in experience. True feeling is not emotional excitement about getting something, it is the calm naturalness of already having it. True persistence is not desperately clinging to a desire, it is peacefully maintaining an assumption because it feels right and natural to do so. Many people fail because they assume with their minds but not with their hearts. They think the right thoughts but continue to feel the old feelings. Remember, it is not your thoughts that create your reality, it is your dominant feeling state. You can think positive thoughts all day long, but if you feel poor, unloved, or unsuccessful, those feelings will outpicture themselves in your experience. This is why the feeling of the wish fulfilled is so crucial. This feeling is your direct connection to the frequency of miracles. When you can genuinely feel wealthy, you are tuned into the frequency of wealth. When you can genuinely feel loved, you are tuned into the frequency of love. When you can genuinely feel successful, you are tuned into the frequency of success. The physical manifestation is simply the natural consequence of maintaining that feeling state. But I must warn you about a common trap. Do not make the mistake of trying to feel grateful for what you do not yet have in your physical experience. Gratitude for things hoped for is not the same as the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Gratitude implies separation. You are grateful to someone else for giving you something. The feeling of the wish fulfilled implies possession. You feel grateful because you naturally feel appreciative of what you already have. When you truly assume you have something, gratitude arises naturally and spontaneously. You do not have to work to feel grateful. You simply feel appreciative because it is natural to feel appreciative of good things in your life. This is the difference between assuming and pretending. When you assume, the feeling is natural and effortless. When you pretend, the feeling is forced and artificial. The Bible says to pray believing you have already received and you shall have. This is not religious doctrine. This is practical instruction for tuning into the frequency of miracles. When you pray, you must pray from the consciousness of already having what you desire, not from the consciousness of lacking it. Your prayer should be a celebration of fulfillment, not a petition for something missing from your life. Let me tell you about a woman who desired to marry a specific man who seemed completely uninterested in her. Instead of praying for God to make him love her, she began to assume the feeling of being his beloved wife. She would imagine their wedding day, their honeymoon, their daily life together as a married couple. She would feel his love for her, his devotion to her, his joy in being her husband. At first, this felt artificial and forced because her senses told her he barely noticed her existence. But she persisted in her assumption, returning to it every night before sleep and whenever she thought of him during the day. Gradually, the assumption began to feel more natural. She began to carry herself with the confidence of a woman who is deeply loved. She began to radiate the happiness of a woman whose heart's desire is fulfilled. The change in her was so pronounced that people began to comment on how beautiful and radiant she had become. And then, quite naturally, he began to notice her. He began to seek out her company. He began to fall in love with the confident, radiant woman she had become through her assumption. Within a year, they were married, and he often remarked that he felt as though he had been waiting his whole life to find her. The miracle was not in making him love her. The miracle was in tuning her consciousness to the frequency of being loved. When she maintained that frequency consistently, it had to manifest in her experience through the most natural and harmonious means possible. This brings me to an important point about free will. Some people worry that using these principles interferes with other people's free will. But you must understand that everyone in your world is simply reflecting back to you your own state of consciousness. When you change your assumptions about others, you do not override their free will. You simply move into a reality where they naturally express the qualities you are assuming they possess. In the infinite field of consciousness, there are versions of every person expressing every possible quality. The version you encounter depends entirely on your assumption about them. When you assume someone is kind, you encounter the kind version of that person. When you assume someone is hostile, you encounter the hostile version. You are not changing them, you are changing which version of them you experience by changing your own state of consciousness. This is why Jesus said to love your enemies. He was not giving you a moral commandment. He was giving you a practical technique for transforming your experience. When you assume the best about others, when you see them as loving and kind and generous, you tune into a frequency where they can only appear to you in that light. Your loving assumption about them creates the conditions in which they naturally express their highest qualities in relation to you. But this requires great discipline and persistence. It is easy to assume the best about others when they are treating you well. The test comes when they are treating you poorly. In those moments, you must remember that they are only reflecting your own assumptions back to you. If you want to change their behavior toward you, you must first change your assumption about them. This does not mean you should tolerate abuse or put yourself in dangerous situations. It means you should recognize that every person in your life is there as a result of your consciousness. And if you want different people or different behavior from the same people, you must tune into it to a different frequency through changed assumptions. The frequency of miracles is ultimately the frequency of love. When you assume the best about yourself and others, when you see everyone is capable of goodness and growth, when you believe in the possibility of change in any situation, you are operating from love. And love is the most powerful frequency in the universe, because love is the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. God is love, and you are made in God's image. Therefore, your fundamental nature is love. When you assume lovingly, you are operating from your true nature. When you assume fearfully or angrily or resentfully, you are operating from a false sense of yourself. The frequency of miracles is simply your consciousness returning to its natural state of love and expressing that love through your assumptions about yourself and your world. This is why I tell you that everything will change when you tune into the frequency of miracles. It is not just your external circumstances that will change, you will change. You will discover depths of power and possibility within yourself that you never knew existed. You will find yourself naturally confident, naturally joyful, naturally peaceful, because you will be living from your true nature rather than from the false beliefs and assumptions that have limited. As you practice these principles, you will begin to understand that there are no small miracles or large miracles. There are only miracles. Healing a headache is no different from healing cancer in terms of the consciousness required. Finding a parking space is no different from finding your life's work. Attracting $10 is no different from attracting $10 million. The only difference is in your assumptions about what is difficult or easy, possible or impossible. In the realm of consciousness, all things are equally possible, because consciousness is the substance from which all things are made. When you truly grasp this truth, you will approach every desire with the same confidence and expectation of fulfillment. You will realize that you have been placing artificial limitations on yourself based on societal beliefs about what is realistic or achievable. But the frequency of miracles knows no such limitations. In this frequency, everything is possible because everything already exists. Your job is not to create what you desire. Your job is to tune into the version of reality where you already have it. This requires a complete shift in how you think about manifestation. You are not bringing something new into existence. You are selecting from infinite existing possibilities by aligning your consciousness with the reality you prefer. This may sound abstract, but it has practical implications for how you approach your desires. Instead of asking, how can I get what I want? You should ask, how would I feel if I already had what I want? Instead of wondering when your desire will manifest, you should assume it has already manifested in consciousness and allow physical reality to catch up. Instead of trying to figure out the steps to your goal, you should simply maintain the state of consciousness appropriate to your goal's fulfillment. The man or woman who has truly tuned into the frequency of miracles lives in a state of constant expectancy. They expect good things to happen because they know that their consciousness is broadcasting goodness. They expect opportunities to appear because they know they are aligned with the frequency of abundance. They expect love to come to them because they know they are radiating love through their assumptions. This expectancy is not desperate or anxious. It is calm and confident. It is the expectancy of someone who has planted a garden and knows that harvest time is coming. It is the expectancy of someone who has mailed a letter and knows it will reach its destination. It is the expectancy that comes from understanding law and trusting in its operation. As I bring these words to a close, I want you to understand that everything I have shared with you tonight is not theory. It is practical truth that you can begin applying immediately. Tonight, when you go to sleep, you have the opportunity to begin tuning into the frequency of miracles. Choose one desire, just one, and assume it is already fulfilled. Feel what it would be like to have it. Let that feeling fill you with joy and satisfaction. Fall asleep in that feeling, and let it be the last thing in your consciousness before you drift off to sleep. Do this night after night, regardless of what your daytime experience shows you. Persist in your assumption with the faith of the gardener who waters his unseen seed. Trust in the law of consciousness as you would trust in the law of gravity. Know that your faithfulness to your assumption must result in its manifestation in your world. Remember, you are not trying to get something you do not have. You are claiming something you already possess in consciousness. You are not hoping for a miracle. You are accepting the miracle that already exists. You are not waiting for change. You are acknowledging the change that has already taken place in the only realm where change can originate, your own wonderful human imagination. The frequency of miracles is broadcasting now. It has been broadcasting all your life, waiting for you to tune in. Tonight, you have the knowledge and the ability to access this frequency. Tomorrow, you can begin to see the evidence of your new assumption appearing in your world. Everything will change because everything has already changed in consciousness, and consciousness is the only reality. Tune into the frequency of miracles and let the miracle of your transformed life begin to unfold. The power is within you. The knowledge is now yours, and the time is now. Your new life is waiting for your assumption to claim it. Make that claim tonight, and everything will change.